Welcome to the We Are All Dying podcast. I'm your host, Jenna Goodhand, and my hope is that through these conversations, we become more comfortable, competent, and confident talking about death. On today's show, we have Ben Wasserman. He is a stand-up comedian and currently on tour with his Live After Death show. I'm so excited for you to tune in to this conversation. Right. Okay. Well, let's just jump right into things. Thank you, Ben, for coming to the conversation. I'm really excited to have you. When I envisioned this podcast, I did see it as something comical,
Cool.
and then I was really surprised it wasn't. One of the conversations have been really really heavy and hard, but really important and good. So
Yeah,
I am really grateful that you're here, and yeah, let's just jump right into death.
cool.
The first question I ask is, when in your life did death become impactful, meaningful? And you can go back as far as you can remember. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be a person; it could be an animal or a thing that you lost
yeah.
in your life.
I mean, it certainly wasn't I could tell you, as long as I could remember, I was very scared of dying, and I had a whole complex about it as a kid, and I don't know where it fully came from beyond knowing that I was named after my grandfather who died before I was born. And if I had to trace it to something, it was probably just that it was like, oh my God, I am a legacy and we're all dying. And then my name get something like that. But then very afraid of death, my whole life and almost untouched by it. I mean, I had a close friend who died by suicide when I was 18. But we hadn't been close friends in like 10 years. Like we grew up together, 5 years, I should say. We grew up together, but then we drifted apart. But then he died, and that was, kind of fucked up. But didn't really. I didn't feel like I did much grieving there. And then my grandmother passed away a little after that, and I also don't feel like I did much grieving there, which I think is very normal for like grandkid grandparent relationship, that unless you took care of one or they raised you like directly, it's like they're expected to die kind of a thing. So then it didn't really hit me as a big thing until my dad started dying from cancer and then died, I think, in 2017. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you had a series of like back to back.
Back to back. And this is where I say, yeah, the next big one was my grandfather, but it counts because I was taking care of him for about a year and a half. So, you know, that does count. But yeah, I lost my dad, and then my friend Nick died by suicide, and then my grandfather died, and then my friend Raghav died unexpectedly, and then my friend Ryan died by suicide, and then and then my uncle Brian died, and then yeah, my friend Steve died unexpectedly. So it was like sort of back to back to back to back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and then that really was like, oh, okay, death is real, time is short, chaos, let's go. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And so before those series of losses, were you already a comedian? Were you already doing
yeah, it would be crazy if I wasn't. I think.
that was your motivator?
Yeah, I don't think that should be anyone's motivator, probably, but I mean, I don't think anyone should do comedy, probably, but more than anything, yeah, no, I was doing comedy for like 4 years already when people started dying.
Yeah. And then did you take some time off? Like what was kind of the timeline here for, you know,
Yeah, I
comedian?
I took two. So my when my dad died, I was running a weekly show here in Brooklyn, with three of my close friends, and which was really helpful because yeah, the girls were able to keep the show going and I could grieve and just, take care of the stuff that had to be taken care of in that like acute immediate moment. And I took off for like 3 weeks, I think, from doing any shows, or hosting our show. And then at one point I was just like, I gotta just see what it would be like to get out of the house and do that. And I like missed, you know, running a show with like three of your close friends and you're in the midst of it's like, oh, I just want to be with my friends. And so I went and I decided to host explicitly so I didn't have to like talk about anything beyond like, we got a great show. What do you do for a living? And where'd you get that shirt? Kind of a thing. But I did wear a shirt that said my dad died 3 weeks ago or whatever, like the whole time, but I don't think I addressed it at all. I just sort of wore it and had
Yeah.
that on and did the show. And I felt good being on stage and like I do a lot of screamy, shouty, whatever kind of stuff. And yeah, being able to like scream and shout and like in a not only grieving household,
Yeah.
really nice. And then yeah, the next week I like did like a set. I don't even remember exactly what it was, but it was something about losing people, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing this now.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I just kept doing it for a couple years.
Yeah. So it's sort of like you like dipped your toe in it with the shirt to kind of be like,
Hmm.
and so then when did it become this full-fledged, chaotic comedy show about grief and loss that you're now entering?
Um, yeah, I mean, as the show that came into being, I first thought about the show almost immediately after like getting, I don't know, it was like somewhere in 2018 after, let's say, 3 to 4 losses and a bunch more bits and goofs and gags around this stuff. I was like, okay, this is people were receptive to it and really liked it. And it was just becoming like, okay, I got so many bits here. Like, I can do an hour with this or something like that. Let's try and think about it. And, or at least that's when I knew I wanted to do a show. And then I had to like keep sort of thinking. I put it on the back burner for a while. I was working. And then just before the pandemic hit, I was finally going to tour it as like a workshop. I have an hour bits about death. Let me try to see what they all look like together and stringed along and any of that. And then the pandemic hit and I had to cancel that. And then the project went on the back burner for like, a year and a half. Um, and then the whole world started grieving and everyone started dying or losing people. And also I got better with my own grief and process like whatever I was getting out of this material was now, you know, 3 to 4 years, like the emotional crux of a lot of it for me was 3 to 4 years late. Because I'm good. I have like a different perspective now. But the whole world the grieving, other people have these stories. I'm not so special. What if I did a show that was sort of a container for other people's experiences and maybe mine are like the instigator for that. But for the most part, the show is about grief and death and dying and loss and all flavors and styles in like the room itself. Which is adds to the chaos of it. And that didn't come until last year when I like did the work. I workshopped it for like a second time. And I was like, okay, this is something. I can like talk to people about this and sometimes make it funny, sometimes just hold space. Um, yeah, sorry, that was like a really meandering answer.
That's okay. Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
have some like trepidation around, you're ready to come out with this thing, but then all of a sudden death is really prevalent and it's everywhere and it's serious and there's all sorts of experiences around it. Did it give you this like sense of hesitation, like maybe now isn't the time, or like
No, if
it's been
anything,
more
I felt like
hard?
now is the time.
Yeah.
Um, and also it's like I'm not the only one who's been doing it. People have been talking, comedians have been talking about that, musicians write about that, like saying about death has been always in art and performance and whatever. So it's not like, oh, is it particularly? sometimes people are like, oh, did it feel taboo? Are you worried? And it's no, I don't know. It's just part of life. And I don't think so, but it felt especially contemporary,
Mm, yeah.
like in the midst of a pandemic almost. I mean, none of my deaths that I experienced, my deaths, none of my losses were like during COVID, and no one that I was like particularly close to um, died during COVID. Um, and so, yeah, it's been, I think, really relevant for people, especially during the show. A lot of people who are coming are like new grievers, or suffering recent losses, or haven't had a place to put their losses or whatever. And a bunch of the stories are people who lost people during the pandemic. So I think it's like incredibly relevant. Yeah, no, I wasn't scared of that.
Yeah. And so it is quite interactive with the audience. Can you give some examples of how you involve people who are there with your act?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so on the basic level, almost every bit, like explicit comedy thing, whether it's a juggling act or a seance or a whatever, I have someone on stage with me doing the thing. Most of the comedy I do requires someone else to be doing something with me, whatever it is. So that's one way that it's interactive, and that's a basic thing. But throughout the show, in between those kind of comedy goof and gag, whatever, are what I call vulnerable moments, which are specifically designed to hopefully make people cry. Um, so that I can say that I'm like a real artist who makes people feel and think. And what we do is we spin the wheel. Because I'm going on tour, I'm working on it now, but that's the wheel. We
Okay.
spin the wheel, wherever it lands, whether it's the afterlife, last will and testament, the death industrial complex, wherever it goes, I open up the floor to conversation and get people's stories, and some fun crowd work, some just holding space for someone's trauma, often, and then we go right back into another stupid, chaotic, high flying circus vaudevillian bit, and then we go back to the vulnerable moment, and it's sort of like that. And so it's interactive, both. It's nonstop interactive. It's just sometimes the interactivity is like the participation is opening up instead of just like putting on a silly costume with me.
Right. Would it be, could we spin the wheel?
Um, yeah, we can spin the wheel. Hold on. Let me see if I can get the wheel going. Um, I mean, I haven't fixed it. It did get crushed, but let's see. All right, so last will and testament.
Hmm.
Do you have
I think I do somewhere. My
Oh, yeah, you're gonna want to find that, I think, for sure. You're gonna
yeah,
want to know where it is for whoever's left.
yeah,
Um, yeah. So like that would be a question.
yeah.
Or have you ever gotten something from someone? Or what's something that you've inherited?
Oh, that's a good one.
I'm wearing my dad's bracelet, whatever. Or sometimes that one can just it depends on what I feel in the moment and how I want to
Yeah,
ask the question or get into the topic. But like sometimes I like asking, if you had a plaque on a park bench, where would the bench, like what park, what bench,
yeah,
kind of a thing. Where would you spread your ashes if you're doing that kind of thing?
yeah.
Uh, Whatever. And then, a handful of people will sort of talk and vibe, and then I'll be like, all right, moving on.
Yeah, those are really fun questions.
Yeah, yeah, and I think yeah. What I've discovered is that people like talking about themselves. And
Totally.
like, yeah, you saw my meandering answers earlier, like so. People like talking about themselves. I think often they're not talking about this kind of stuff, and there aren't spaces where they feel like they could, and undoubtedly they're thinking about it. Or if they're not, God bless them. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's been a fun way to engage with people, I think.
Yeah,
Beyond
I
just
think
like, where'd you get that shirt?
yeah, totally. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but as you said that, I'm thinking, when someone first dies, there's this initial phase that you go through, and people give you space to talk about it. But a lot of the processing actually happens like in the many months and years beyond. And so I think those questions are really giving people time to talk about something that probably someone didn't ask them earlier on because it didn't seem fitting, but they've been thinking about, yeah, the necklace they're wearing, or this bench that matters to them, or a space
Hmm.
they want to be. And so I think, you're really offering people extended grief.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I started this show just to be a funny little guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I just want to be a funny little guy. I'm
Yeah.
not, um, and concretely not an advocate for, I mean, I am because I don't think you can divorce someone's actions from their like values or whatever. So obviously I have a very specific set of like beliefs and values about this stuff, and I do think
Yeah.
it's important to talk about it and all that. It is cool that just wanted to be a funny little guy and a scamp running around stage. I somehow have created like again this container for people to like really bring to it whatever they need, which has been cool. Because like I don't know, what I found in my own grief, I think, was like for grieving and mourning is like I needed to do it on my own schedule. Like you need to do it on your what I learned is I need to do it on my own schedule. I think this probably rings true for other people too, but like you're you're gonna like probably self-destruct at times, but like you don't have to focus on that part because there's also a lot of moments of joy and life and beauty and everything else that flows from it. But like you're gonna do with grief what you will and what you need to personally or whatever it is. And I think people come into the show with whatever they are looking for, they wind up getting, but that's because they're putting it into it. I like sort of create this vacuum where they can do it, which like again is because I don't really hammer home this is my story and this is my tale and this is my take and whatever. It's like not about that. I don't care to do that. Um so yeah, it's nice that that happened, but it really is accidental.
Okay, and then like, so speaking of the container, you do these shows in some pretty interesting spaces. Can you share a little bit about where these take place?
I do the show at funeral homes. I do the show at cemeteries. I've done the show at a mortuary museum. I'm talking with a hospice. I am talking with a casket manufacturer. Anywhere that's sort of death related that we avoid um, until we need to be there.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm trying to bring, and I also do it at like DIY spaces, jazz clubs, comedy clubs, whatever, like wherever, ultimately wherever I can get it, but intentionally mostly at funeral homes and cemeteries. And I do it once a month here in Brooklyn at a funeral home.
And so, what is the hope of the takeaway from having them in these death spaces that we typically only visit at certain times or do our best to avoid? What are you hoping that the takeaway is from that?
Hmm. Well, I guess there's a few different things. One, honestly, it's just, oh, that's fucking cool. Uh, Damn, that's weird. A show about death at a funeral home, at a cemetery. That's like the the buzziness of it. That I'm like nobody as a comedian, right? Like I'm not a big time viral person. I've never been on TV. Well, I've been on TV, but not in any real way. Not for my comedy, like performing or whatever. I'm not a star, so I need people to care in some capacity, and like putting it in a funeral home or a cemetery on like that most surface level gets people's attention. But then, I mean, there is a real way in which it primes people
Hmm.
walking into a cemetery, walking into a funeral home, being surrounded by coffins in a mortuary. You're primed for death and dying and mortality and grief and loss in a like powerful way. Um, and I think, I mean, for these places and institutions, it's like here's an opportunity to start. One thing that I keep hearing is like, oh, this when people want it. This is a great idea. We've been trying to find ways to get younger people in, to build relationships with the community, to extend out to families and create spaces where people can like heal and grieve or just share in community and culture together here and like explore death and dying and whatever. And so like they see the benefit to it for them is just a way to bring people in and start rethinking how they relate to the world in a way, which I think is really cool. Yeah, so I think it operates on like a few different levels doing it in these
Yeah,
places.
I love that. The idea, like, I mean, if you live in the same town for a long time, you end up going to the same funeral home as people die over the years. So I'm thinking of like people returning there after having your show and having, some laughs internally about like the things that they experienced when they were there. It's not so much this place that you only visit during hard times, but seeing death as a part of our living lives, I think is also something that
Yeah,
you're really helping people with.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we only go there at the worst times when for death, and like there's still a whole lot of life after death to be had. Um, and grief is for the living. And like how are you connecting with people, how are you being there in a presence beyond just the undertakers and the embalmers and like the boogeymen almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, we really do kind of shield ourselves from that world. Even, just myself learning about like the death industry and all the different
Mm-hmm.
roles
Oh
and
yeah,
jobs and like these are people's lives who have to take care of all of our dead people and
totally,
what's their life like? Right? Yeah.
totally, totally, yeah.
So what are some things that you've experienced or reflected on from having this show and talking about death so much that's changed you as a person?
That one's always a hard question. I mean, the real answer is, and I don't think it actually pertains to the topic of the podcast, but it's like I've learned a lot about myself and what I can do because this has been a very much DIY, self-produced. I mean, I have a cadre of friends who I love dearly and are part of the show family who have like really helped make it happen by taking tickets or opening or putting on a costume or giving fake tattoos or helping me build props and all that. And but for the most part, it's like done a lot, just about all of this alone. And knowing that I could is really cool. And like I think there is a tether to the death and dying and grief because when you lose people, you realize how precious, like we were talking earlier, how precious time is, and why not try and make the most of it and go out and do something and whatever. And um, doing the show has been like a really good marker of, oh, I've been doing that. I've been doing this life thing pretty hard and it's working out pretty well. Right, got me on this podcast, kind of a thing. So that's cool. In terms of death and die, I don't, what amazes me, um, and I guess I already said this earlier, but I think I knew it before, but just the like myriad ways in which grief happens and death happens and how people process and talk about it. Um, that there's no one right way to grieve is so helpful. And I think like hearing other people's stories, whether me or other people hearing it, other people hearing other people's story, like whatever, um, allows people, especially if they're actively grieving, to be like, oh, I can be easier on myself because I found being super hard on myself a lot throughout the like acute grief period. And like I gotta get back to work. I gotta do this stuff. I gotta stop sleeping with a stranger, like whatever it was. Drink less, whatever. Um, and being able to share and hear other people's stories, I think is just like recommitted that idea that like there's no one right way to live, to grieve, any of it. And there's something really nice about that, the like tapestry of that, I think. Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't ask everyone this, but you may have thought about how you want to celebrate your death. Do you have
Hmm.
some ideas on how you want that to go?
Um, I mean, it depends on how I'm going. I would trust I would trust the people in my life who would have to do stuff to do like I'd like to make everything as easy as possible, but I'd also be clear, I don't have any specific uh nothing specific, whatever's the cheapest, most environmentally friendly way where people can like try and feel good. Well, no. You know what? I say that. I want it to be devastating. I want, yeah, I want a big parade in Brooklyn, and I want even if they have to hire people, I want like thousands of people there. And I want to make a big deal about it. And I want Ariana Grande to sing at it. Um, I mean that feels like really fun to me.
Yeah.
But ultimately, yeah, whatever's easiest and simplest. I like, if anything, one thing the show has done and like producing the show has done because I have to interact with so many people in this industry, in like the death industry and stuff, is just both how expensive stuff could be, but also how many options there are for what you can do, especially that is like less wasteful of resources and land and all of that. And so like I'd hope that the people in my life do something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I can totally just maybe it's because like the wheel's like right behind your head, but I'm like, maybe it comes down to like a wheel that they spin and like this is, this is what they're
I
gonna do.
maybe I could leave a wheel. Yeah. I
There's some
mean,
options.
yeah, just some options. Hey, bury me at sea, cremate me, shoot me into space. I do think I'd like to have one last party or
Mhm.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
I can do that.
Um, I mean, you probably know what people take away from the show because they probably tell you, but if you were to like overhear two people who go out for coffee after a show and they're talking about the experience, like what are you hoping that they're saying? What do you hope they got out of it?
Oh wow. On some level, it's really just wow, that was so fucking funny. That guy is so hot, and that was so funny. Like I've never seen anything like that before. It's really stuck with me.
Mm.
I like can't get it out of my head. That story that that woman shared about this and that. Like it doesn't even need to be about me fully. It's like I want the experience to stay with people. When I was coming up with it, I was like really freaked out. And I think this has a lot to do with my fear of death, right? You want to make a mark, you want to make do a thing, live a life, be remembered, whatever. And I kept using the phrase to people when I was like coming up with what the show now looks like between like the first workshop and the second one. And so many different ideas floating around in my head, and like maybe I do this, maybe I do that, like whatever. And I would talk to people and I'd be like, I just want it to stick in people's throats for a couple days, like just like sit there. um Whether it's because I'm so funny or I'm so hot or I'm so smart or I'm so sweet and tender or they heard that story or this story or they never saw something like that, whatever. So yeah, if I heard people, that's what I'd want to hear. What I think people wind up getting out of it is, and what I've heard more often, um, and have overheard the next day or later that night at a bar, um, that was really powerful. I didn't know I needed that. I didn't know I need to hear other people's stories. I feel less alone. That show allowed me, even though I didn't talk during it or participate, I was thinking about, and I'm very intentional at the beginning to ask people to think about someone in their life, not my people. Um, but I was thinking about my grandmother throughout, and I really got some, like, whatever it is. That's mostly what people have been, and super funny, you're hot, that comes into.
Maybe you need to change your marketing a bit.
Maybe I do. Yeah.
So they know. So they're primed. They're primed for the hotness and the coolness.
Yeah. Well, there's an explicit bit in the where I make everyone say I'm hot. So it's okay.
That's great. That's the best part about having your own show.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Right. So yeah, speaking of doing whatever you want, how do you see this evolving? Are there some other ideas that you have, some spin-offs, a reality
Mm,
show,
yeah.
documentary?
Um, I am working with a friend. We've been filming we've filmed a few of the shows. I have footage of most of the shows. Um, what started out as maybe making a self-produced special kind of thing or whatever. I don't know. This is just two artists working together, and what's gonna happen is we've been having a difficult time figuring out how to make this a special, and then that's transformed into what if we made a documentary about trying to make a special, which might span whatever the next show is. Live After Death as a show. I don't know. I will probably put it out or hopefully be able to put it out in some way as like a special soon. I'm going to continue touring it and performing it through just about the end of this year, self-producing it, that is. It's been a long 2 years plus. Um, and it's been exhausting. And it's like a lot of emotionally, a lot of like grief to hold for other people,
Yes.
uh, and myself. And as an artist, I'm just like kind of getting bored with it. And as like material wise, and it's very hard to keep self-producing it on my own, being so emotionally taxed and just exhausted by the material. And so after this run through like October-ish or so, take a little break, and then um I've dealt with a bunch of heartbreak and also love in the last few months. But it has made me really reflect on relationship and commitment and love and heartbreak. And so as of now, the next show is going to be Live After Love, and it's going to be, talking about all that stuff. And that'll be the thing that I like most focus on. If funeral homes and cemeteries and all sorts of places want the show, um, I'm down to bring it back. I'm not like retiring it forever, but I just have to, I think it's best for everyone if I
Mm,
shift focus for a minute.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's really,
Yeah.
yeah, that's very thoughtful of the whole experience, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Thanks.
any plans to come to Canada before you retire it?
Um, I am hopefully gonna at least try and do Vancouver, and then, Toronto isn't too far, and neither is Montreal. So I think those three at least I would try to do. Yeah, where are you based?
I'm about 2 hours from Toronto, so if
Okay.
you come up here, I'll get all my little death lovers
Okay.
to come to the
Okay,
show. Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I will make a commitment
We'll do
now.
like a death bus. We'll fill up a
That
death
sounds,
bus.
oh my God, that
Yeah,
sounds so fun.
yeah,
But yeah, I will keep you posted on that.
amazing.
Cool.
Well, I don't want to take any more of your time. I know that you've got so much like to plan, and I want
Oh,
you to conserve your energy and everything. But this has
thank
been such
you.
a treat, and I'm so grateful for the conversation, but also for like all the goodness you've put out into the world. I think,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, like you've touched
Yeah.
so many lives, and I'm sure there's people talking right now about how hot you are and how your show has like changed their life, and yeah, so
Oh,
they're really
that's so
embracing
fun.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jenna. This has been a treat.
Good luck with everything.
Thanks. I'll talk to you.
Okay, thanks, Beth.
Bye.
Bye. Talking about death is perhaps one of the hardest things for us to talk about as humans. My hope is that through each episode, you find one piece of our conversation that you are able to take into your own conversations and communities. If there's a topic that you would like me to cover or a guest you think would be great for the show, please let me know. And thank you so much for tuning in.